Okay, so as we're not going to replay all of these odious videos of the Donald announcing his ethnic cleansing plan for Gaza. And just to be clear, if you look back at news reports from as early as October 2023, you can easily ascertain that this too was the plan of the Biden administration. They wanted to force as many Palestinians out of Gaza into the Sinai. There was a lot of press coverage about this, but they were trying to, conceal their intentions, whereas the Donald has no scruples whatsoever about openly declaring that he's going to clean out Gaza, as if, the Palestinian people there are, refuse. I mean, what does it mean when you say clean out something? It means you're going to remove the dirt. I mean, that's how offensive this man's attitude towards the Palestinian people are. And he's being open about it. The project remains the same. It's just a certain level of audacity in terms of Trump's commentary that you didn't see with the Biden administration, which was, or tried to be more deceptive about it. In any event, what we want to focus on today, we're not going to replay, as I said, all of those odious Trump videos. I want to talk about, with Rami, the reaction in the non-Western world to Trump's brazen declaration of an ethnic cleansing plan for Gaza. And we'd like to start by showing you a very interesting interview that the former head of Saudi intelligence, a man by the name of al-Turki, had with Christian Amanpour a few days ago. And could you pull up video one, please?
Welcome to the program. Rami, you have been digesting what came from the White House last night. You probably heard the view from Ramallah. So is there going to be a united Arab front against this Trump vision?
Thank you, Ms. Amanpour, for inviting me. After hearing Mr. Barghouti, I really don't know what to add to what he said, other than to say that what came out of Mr. Trump is not digestible. I respectfully decline to add more disrespectful comments to that. But it is a fantasy to think that ethnic cleansing in the 21st century can be condoned by a world community that stays on its behinds and does not respond to that. The problem in Palestine is not the Palestinians. It is the Israeli occupation. And this has been clear and understood by everybody. Hence, you have United Nations resolutions calling for the quid pro quo of land for peace from 1967 until now. The Arab Peace Initiative, of course, is based on that and offered Israel not only diplomatic relation, but all of the things that Israel wanted, from trade, from normalization, etc., in return for the establishment of a Palestinian state with its capital in East Jerusalem. All of these things were American policy until this latest wording that Mr. Trump has chosen to use in claiming that he wants to do better things, when actually it is going to turn things into more conflict and more bloodshed.
So we didn't play the whole interview there, but he goes on to refer to the Trump's plan as the mad ethnic cleansing plan. Now, of course, and I can see this in the comments, and it's entirely fair commentary, who trusts the Saudis, or how can anybody trust the Saudis when it comes to the well-being of the Palestinian people? With a sentiment with which, I agree completely, and I'm sure Rami would agree as well. But the thing is, this man is a person who had a very important position within the Saudi regime. I doubt that he would make these comments calling this a mad ethnic cleansing plan without the approval of the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. And although it's entirely possible that the Saudi regime is going to turn around and stab the Palestinian people in the back, it's really hard for them to walk back this type of commentary, and suddenly do a normalization deal with Israel after Gaza has been ethnically cleansed. if their intention was to do that, it's hard to understand why they would be using this kind of harsh commentary and saying point blank, there will be no normalization deal. And they've said it again and again, including in the last few days, until the Palestinian people have a state. So I think this is meaningful. I don't trust the Saudis. I'm going to get back to why I think it's meaningful when we finish reviewing commentary from, the autocrats of Egypt and Jordan, which we're about to do. But I'm just curious, Rami, what was your reaction to this spiel by Al-Turki?
My first reaction is that whether this is a victory or not, we'll discuss this a bit later on, but clearly the tone has changed since October 7th. The Palestinian people on October 7th had a duty to slow down Arab normalization of Israel. And Saudi Arabia was flirting with this idea. They probably still are. Whether these statements are honest or not, it's most likely not as honest as the Turkey claims to make it seem. But this is clearly demonstrating that the Palestinian people, the people of Gaza, are keeping these autocrats, these dictators in check. And the Saudi government now needs to mitigate and balance pressure from the Palestinians and also pressure from their own people in knowing that if the Palestinian people are ethnically cleansed, then the custodians of Mecca and Medina, right, the Saudi regime, will be held accountable. So it might mean that there's going to be forms of normalization that will be done differently and not an outright one as they may be intended to do so before October 7th. But then again, Al-Turki keeps referring to the two-state solution, these accords that have been agreed upon since the 1980s or 1990s. And I feel like it's disgenuine that we keep playing the same broken record. Like nothing is, like the people in Gaza are now employing new methods to protect their own rights, and the Saudis are still playing within the boundaries that the Americans let them to play around, which is you need to talk about a two-state solution. Now, there was this other comment where he says we need to throw the Israelis back into Alaska. This is, I believe, a better way of dealing with this issue is that you need to start discussing, we need to stir things around and can't be using back the same tactics that have obviously put the Palestinians in the place that they're in today. So that were my initial thoughts hearing Al-Turki speak.
Okay. So let's go to the next autocrat, US-backed autocrat, Al-Sisi, the president of Egypt. And, Trump likes to refer to him as the general, or during his first administration, he called him his favorite dictator. What did he actually did that? What did Sisi have to say?
بشأن موضوع تهجير الفلسطينيين، وأود أن أطمئن الشعب المصري بأنه لا يمكن أبدا التساهل أو السماح بالبساس بالأمن القومي المصري، وأطمئنكم بأننا عازمون على العمل مع الرئيس ترامب وهو يرغب في تحقيق السلام، التوصل إلى السلام المنشود القائم على حل الدولتين. ونرى أن الرئيس ترامب قادر على تحقيق ذلك الغرض الذي طال انتظاره بإحلال السلام العادل الدائم في منطقة الشرق الأوسط. حل هذه الأزمة اللي جاء هذا الظلم التاريخي مش إخراج الشعب الفلسطيني من مكانه، لا، هو أن يبقى في حل للدولتين جنبا إلى جنب، أمن وسلام للمواطن الإسرائيلي وأمن وأمان للمواطن الفلسطيني. الظلم التاريخي اللي وقع للفلسطينيين وتم تهجيرهم قبل كده ولم يرجعوا إلى مناطق ثبت أو سبق التأكيد لهم إن هم ممكن يرجعوا تاني بعد ما يتم تعميرها. هل ممكن الكلام ده يتكرر مرة تاني؟ أنا ما افتكرش. وبقول إن الشعب المصري لو أنا طلبت منه هذا الأمر هيخرج كله في الشارع المصري ويقول لي لا، لا تشارك في ظلم، لا تشارك في ظلم.
So I think that last part was really the punchline, right? If he said very clearly, we're not on board with this project, this is an injustice. But at the very end, he said, if I did this, the Egyptian people would take to the streets and they would say, we will take no part in this injustice. And of course, some of us, not you, Rami, but me, I'm old enough to remember that the assassination of Sadat, the Egyptian president, after he did a collaborationist peace deal with Israel, by people who were upset about that. And of course, there was also the overthrow of the Shah of Iran, who was a US puppet for many years, very much a collaborationist with the Israeli regime. He was overthrown in the Islamic Revolution. And there have been other instances of the people rising up. I don't think Sisi or al-Turki or Mohammed bin Salman or the Jordanian autocrat we're about to hear from his foreign minister have a particular commitment to justice for the Palestinian people. I think it would be naive of us to believe that at this stage. But they do care about their own power and their own wealth. And I think that was really sort of highlighted at the very end there of Sisi's comments, where he talked about a potential, he didn't use the word uprising, but he talked very much about Egyptians taking to the streets and revolting against any policy of facilitating the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. How did you read his comments, Rami?
Dimitri, the first thing he mentioned is that displacing the Palestinians is a national security threat to Egypt. So this is not a benevolent leader who's coming to the defense of the Palestinian people. He's coming to the defense of Egypt. First of all, he sees the Palestinians as a source of instability, which might be true if we're exiled from our own land. But he understands that the conflict will now be moved away from Gaza and into Egypt, whether the Palestinians throw attacks towards Israel from Egyptian territory, or even if they start instability within Egypt and wanting to overthrow Sisi. The Palestinians rightfully worked against the dictatorship in Jordan by trying to overthrow the Jordanian leadership during Black October. And in Lebanon as well, the Palestinians were quite mobilized in trying to get their rights brought back to them. So Sisi is clearly saying that this has nothing to do with Palestine at the beginning and all to do with Egyptian national security.
In other words, his own security. I think that's what he's most concerned with.
Exactly. Now, then again, the Sisi is mentioning that. Sisi is mentioning that he's scared of that his people are going to take him down if he is to accept the forced displacement of the Palestinians. But this is not the first time that Sisi would have gone against his own people and do massacres to bring down protests. He did it in Rabaa Square, amongst many other protests that were held against his rule. So I wouldn't discount that. But then again, he keeps talking about the two-state solution. And there's a bit of a big similarity between what al-Turki was saying and what Sisi was saying as well. And it's that they're all still talking within the parameters that the Americans let them to speak towards. Escalate this, stir things around. This is not the time to speak about two-state. This is about bringing justice to the Palestinians. So they're not showing any leverage or new tools that would be available to them to enforce the rights that the Palestinians have. They're basically putting their cards on the table, and it's the same cards that they've always put there, and that has brought nothing at all. So This is my initial concerns, and we could talk more about this, but Dimitri, I think we're going to probably drill this further later on, about the only people who will bring any form of justice to the Palestinian people are the Palestinians themselves.
Absolutely. We'll get into that some more in a moment. Let's go to the Jordanian foreign minister, shall we? And interestingly, before you start this video, I just want to comment as someone who is a Greek citizen, not just a Canadian citizen, spends a lot of time in Greece. I found it interesting that he gave this speech standing beside the Greek foreign minister, who is a complete and utter vassal of the United States and is 100% complicit in the genocide in Gaza in a variety of ways, which I've spoken about in other programs and episodes. But it's interesting to watch his body language. The Greek foreign minister, as the Jordanian foreign minister, is diplomatically saying, "No, we're not going to agree to this." Please go ahead and play the clip, Rami. Thank you.
Our determination to ensure that the ceasefire holds, that enough humanitarian supplies enter Gaza so that the humanitarian catastrophe is addressed, and then to move forward towards achieving the just and lasting peace that is a necessity for the region and for the world on the basis of the two-state solution. I briefed the minister on the outcome of our meeting in Cairo, which reiterated our collective commitment to achieving just peace on the basis of the two-state solution that will ensure that Palestinians stay on their land and that Israel gets the security that it deserves as well, within the context of the two-state solution that the whole world supports. And as you know, we made a clear announcement in that meeting that we're going to continue to work with our partners, whether in the US or in Europe, and we sent a letter to the US Secretary of State, again saying that we're partners in the pursuit of a just and lasting peace in the region, and we're ready to work with the Trump administration to bring about that peace. President Trump says he wants to bring about peace to the region, and we are partners to him and to his administration in this effort, and we'll do whatever it takes from our side to make sure that we put solutions on the table and that we move forward in a very practical and meaningful way towards ending the conflict and achieving the peace that has eluded us, hopefully under the Trump administration.
Yeah, so let me say, first of all, that the Jordanian foreign minister has taken ass-kissing to an art form. He's really elevated it to a level of artistry that is difficult to surpass. But nonetheless, I have to say that I think of the three of these autocrats, the Saudi crown prince, the Egyptian dictator, and the Jordanian king, as they refer to him, he's in the weakest position. The Jordanian autocrat is, first of all, very dependent, much more dependent, I think, on the United States and Israel for various forms of sustenance than Egypt and especially Saudi Arabia. And it's interesting to see sort of the level of aggression in their commentary. I thought the most aggressive commentary came from al-Turki, who, as I said, referred to this as a mad ethnic cleansing plan in that interview with Christian Amanpour. And then you had Sisi, who was saying, look, the Egyptian people are going to rise up. This is a historic injustice. We can't countenance this. And then you had the extremely weak and vulnerable Jordanian autocrats foreign ministers saying, and these were the key words, we have to ensure that the Palestinian people remain on their land. That was the money shot. And at other points, they've actually gone further than that and suggested that the expulsion of the Palestinians from the West Bank into Jordan would amount to a declaration of war. So they have had occasion to use harsher language than you heard there. But all three of them, and I think these are probably, when it comes to the question of expelling Palestinians from Gaza, these are probably the three most important Arab states: Egypt and Jordan, because they border on Israel, and Saudi Arabia because of its economic and military power amongst the Arab states. So all three of them, you've heard in various forms, with various intonations, are saying, we will not accept this. And before we move on, because I'd like to now, talk about how Russia and China are reacting to this and the interplay of their commentary with the Arab states. What did you make of this commentary from the Jordanian autocrats foreign minister, Rami?
Dimitri, I feel like I've heard 3 times the same speech by different people. And this is why I think there's truly no substance. The Jordanian leader says the two-state solution that everyone supports. Well, clearly Trump doesn't support it. He's talking about ethnic cleansing. And I think that there's something very wary of bringing the subject of ethnic cleansing up front, because it's a distraction of what this ongoing struggle is about. And I think it maybe gives leeway for the Saudi regime to do exactly what the UAE did in 2020 when they claimed to have normalized with Israel to stop a war on Gaza, right? So it's like a bit of maybe carrot and sticks, not the best analogy here, but maybe we could see the Saudi Arabians normalizing with Israel just to avoid and claim that it's a victory because they were able to stop the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. So those are all things that don't get me too impressed. Although, it's great to hear people talk about about condemning the fact that Palestinians should not be removed from their own land. But then again, these people have stayed silent during a genocide. These people have not provided any form of military support. And Saudi Arabia took advantage, was entirely responsible for the situation in Syria while this genocide was happening along with Qatar. So I'm not super impressed by what we just heard.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to push back a little bit on that because I don't think they've been silent. It's true that their actions have not matched their rhetoric. But in November of, just to give you an example, in November of last year, the Saudi Crown Prince himself described what Israel was doing as a genocide. And I don't know how you normalize with Israel after you've said that it's committing a genocide and the Palestinian people are being expelled from their land. I think that would be political suicide, frankly, for the Saudi autocrat. If he was trying to fool his people into believing that there was some justification for what Israel is doing, maybe he could get by. He could survive collaboration with the expulsion of the Palestinian people. But when he himself has characterized this as a genocide, to normalize with Israel after it has actually carried out the expulsion of Palestinians from Gaza and or the West Bank, I believe that would probably be political suicide for the Saudi autocrat.
Dimitri, beyond these words, I believe that while the Red Sea was shut down by the resistance in Yemen, they created a land tunnel through Saudi Arabia. And the Saudi Arabians historically have shown that they could put the West on their knees just by closing the valves of their oil pipelines and to cut production. Maybe that would be the right time to do something along those lines, to put the pressure that is needed to put an end to this genocide. If we know there's one thing Americans like more than Israel, it's a proper flow of oil. So this is the biggest leverage Saudi Arabia has. It has nothing to do with any military support for the resistance in Gaza, and they could just turn it off for 1 hour and see what kind of earthquake that will have in the region. So this is what I.
Yeah. So let's continue with, because I think this is a very interesting conversation we're having, and I want to be very clear. I'm going to repeat again. I have zero trust in any of these autocrats, and I readily acknowledge that any or all of them could stab the Palestinian people in the back again. But I tend to think that we're in new territory now. And even though they haven't backed up their rhetoric with actions by, for example, cutting off the flow of oil, sanctioning Israel and so forth, they are in a really, really difficult place right now because of the audacity of what Trump is saying and doing with the full, backing of the genocidal entity. I think it's important to recall that these autocrats are not omnipotent. They can be overthrown. Now, it may be very costly to the people to try to overthrow them. And I'm sure it would be, whether you're talking about the people of Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan. But at the end of the day, when you reach a point as an ordinary citizen where you think that subservience to the autocrat is more painful than, the cost of revolting, you'll revolt. And at some point, we're going to reach that stage where, many people living under the burden of this rule, of these autocratic rulers backed up by the West, say, we're not going to take it anymore. And however painful it's going to be, we are going to revolt. And I think that they're aware of that. I think that they understand that they're currently skating on very thin ice politically. So this brings us to the other game in town, as I like to call it, which is the BRICS. So why don't we, first of all, play the clip, Rami, of the Russian Federation's ambassador to the United Nations, a gentleman by the name of Nebenzia, who was caught by some journalists as he was walking through the halls of the UN in New York City and asked about Trump's ethnic cleansing plan.
Ambassador.
Donald Trump is meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu right now, and Donald Trump.
He never reported to me yet.
No comment, sir. Ambassador, Donald Trump is saying that Palestinians must be resettled out of Gaza to live somewhere else.
I think this is out of question. The Palestinians do not want it. The world community doesn't want it. And you cannot forcefully resettle someone somewhere. The Palestinians suffered so much injustice in their existence that this one, on top of all the others, will be a real shame.
Ambassador, but he says Trump has been saying that it's impossible to live in Gaza now. He's even saying even for the Israeli will be impossible.
We were told by our briefers today that Palestinians vote with their feet. They return back to the places where they used to live, despite all the damage that has been done, despite all the rubble that is around them. They want to live in the place which they belong, which they consider their home.
If everything is ruined now, today, I mean.
Even now, you saw the number of people, the columns that are going to the north, to the places where they habitate. They want to live. They want.
But it's dangerous. Maybe come back, but
what's your solution? Do you want to resettle them too, as President
no, means
Trump
like,
wants?
but like somebody says maybe to fix something and then they can go live there. But to live now, today, now, there, could it be dangerous?
They lived in awful conditions all this time before this ceasefire, which still remains very fragile, and they managed to sustain and to survive in these conditions. Now, at least, they have a little respite with the ceasefire, which hopefully will.
Would Russia help to reconstruct?
We will help, of course, but for that we need to have sustainable, not just ceasefire, but no military operations, because you rebuild something next day, it is destroyed.
Do you think Jordan and Egypt should take in these 2 million Palestinians?
Ask Jordan and Egypt about it, but they already said it themselves that they are not buying this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Sorry, Dimitri.
Sorry, go ahead, Rami.
It's just extremely comical how the journalists are kind of normalizing the idea of ethnic cleansing, trying to engineering it to work.
Yeah, they're legitimizing the idea that expelling Palestinians from Gaza would be a humanitarian gesture. I mean, these people have absolutely no scruples, no conscience, nothing. There's no recognition that Israel created the conditions that currently exist there.
This is a crime against humanity. And it's just being like enforced and trying to make sense of it. And how could we like move the pieces and do some geometrical transfusions or whatever it is, that word, to find a way to get the Palestinians off of their rightful land. These were people that were we saw total destruction in Gaza, and we're saying, well, there's too much destruction. How can they live? Sanction the people that caused destruction. Mm-hmm. It's Absolutely. Like we're not focused on the right issues here.
And who in the mainstream media, the so-called mainstream media, ever is, Rami? I mean, these people are so bankrupt morally. It's hard to find the words anymore. Now, I think, would you agree with me? There was really I didn't hear anything in the comments of Ambassador Nebenzia which suggested flexibility on the question of the expulsion of Palestinians. He was unequivocal. No, it's totally unacceptable. The Palestinians want to stay, and we have no right to expel them from their land. And so did you hear any wiggle room in there? I didn't hear any wiggle room.
I think he even said that it's physically impossible. It's physically impossible to get the Palestinians off of their land. They resisted a genocide for a year and a half. And you think that now is a time to get them out of their land? Like, if anyone has shown that they will never move off of their land, it is the Palestinian people.
100%.
So there are other solutions. And some people were talking about sending the Israelis to Greenland and Alaska. I think that's a conversation we should be having. This one might be able to make more sense. We know when the Palestinians started resisting, they all fled to the airport. Palestinians haven't. So I mean, there are definitely solutions to this conflict. We just need to be a bit more creative and maybe start with the people that have not as much right to this land as the indigenous people.
Right. So let's then turn to China before we talk about what all of this may mean. And now I found a video of a foreign ministry spokesperson speaking, but I thought that this article was much more revealing. It's an article from the South China Morning Post that came out in the last couple of days. If you could pull that up, Rami.
Yes.
And this article, I think, is quite telling for a couple of reasons. The first thing I want to note about this this piece, if you scroll, can you scroll down, Rami?
Yeah, I just kind of lost the, yeah, okay.
So if you can stop there, you'll see in the second paragraph, the Chinese Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs, thank you, said, quote, Gaza belongs to Palestinians and is an inseparable part of Palestinian territory. Then if you go down, any arrangements regarding the future of Gaza must respect the will of the Palestinian people. Then he's quoted as saying, China has always firmly supported the legitimate national rights of the Palestinian people and effective jurisdiction of the Palestinian Authority over all Palestinian territories, including Gaza and the West Bank. If you scroll down, he said, he added that Beijing would continue to maintain close communication and collaboration with Arab countries. And this is, for me, quite telling. Friday's meeting was held upon the request of Arab states, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said. So Arab states are going to China and looking for backing for the notion that the Palestinians must not be expelled from their land. They go on to say that the ambassadors had said they expected China to continue to play a constructive role in safeguarding international fairness and justice and supporting Palestine's legitimate national rights. And I just want to remind people, if you don't, and those who may not know this already, that before the International Court of Justice, the Chinese representative actually said within the last year that the Palestinian people have the right to armed resistance to achieve their dream of self-determination. So here you have the two most, certainly when it comes to military matters, I think Russia is the most important member of the BRICS. Economically, China is the most important member of the BRICS. And they are taking an unwavering position in support of Palestinian self-determination and against the despicable ethnic cleansing plan of Trump and Netanyahu. And, I think it bears pointing out here that Egypt and Saudi Arabia at the beginning of this year actually became members of the BRICS. And very recently, China mediated a reconciliation of sorts between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And throughout this 16 months of horror, that fragile détente it seems to have survived. There still is, diplomatic relations and a sort of era of détente between Iran and the Saudis, mediated by China. Now, it's not just about the fact that Egypt and Saudi Arabia are members of the BRICS. I think it's also important to point out the degree to which these three key countries in this dispute about the ethnic cleansing of Gaza have become economically integrated with China. Could we please pull up, this would be image 6, Saudi Arabia's main export partners. And you'll see there that, China accounts for 19% of Saudi Arabia's exports. And, the United States is way down there at 7%. It's, well under half of the percentage of exports accounted for by China. India is second place, and it too is a member of the BRICS. So, this, I can assure you, is going to give the Chinese a very significant degree of leverage with the Saudi autocracy. Now, can we look at the next?
Just quickly, I even think that China is one of the largest foreign investors in Saudi Aramco, the largest oil producer in the world.
Right, absolutely. And now let's look at Saudi Arabia's main import partners. This would be image number 7. And there you see that China accounts for 22% of Saudi Arabia's imports. The United States is, almost a quarter. I mean, a little more than a quarter of in terms of its accounting for imports to Saudi Arabia. So China has become much more important as a trading partner to Saudi Arabia than the United States has. And, it's taking a position which is clearly aligned with the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination and to remain on their land. Now, why don't we have a look, Rami, at the Jordanian situation, the top trading partners of Jordan. This would be image number 9. And you're going to find out, that China also plays an important role on the export side. The United States is the most important partner, but when it comes to imports, it's China. China is the top source of imports into Jordan. And if Jordan had to replace whatever it's importing from China, it probably would have to pay, its people would have to pay significantly more. Presumably, the reason why China is becoming so important is because the imports are relatively inexpensive relative to competing products. And you'll see that when it comes to imports, the United States is well down the list, approximately a third of China. China's trading with Jordan. And finally, why don't we take a look at the statistics with respect to Egypt? This would be image number 8. So again, you can see there that the main import partner for Egypt by a huge margin is China, well over double the share of the United States. And the third one, equal to the United States, is Saudi Arabia. So, you have hugely important economic relations between China and these 3 states, and they're growing in importance. And, China has a tremendous amount of political and military heft as well, and is, as I say, taking a position which is unequivocally aligned with the right of Palestinian self-determination and the right of Palestinians to remain on their homeland. So, as I say, we are no longer in the world where the United States is the only game in town. If all of this had been happening 20 years ago, these autocrats in Egypt and Jordan and Saudi Arabia might feel that as politically perilous as it may be to collaborate with the expulsion of Palestinians from their homeland, they really don't have any alternative because the United States is the only game in town. But that's simply no longer true. They have an alternative which is arguably more important to them from an economic perspective. And just imagine how these leaders, how they feel when they contrast the way the Russians and the Chinese are speaking about this crisis to the way the Americans are speaking about this crisis. Trump is talking about it like he's developing a new casino in Gaza. He's talked about this being the new Riviera. They're looking at this man, they're saying, are you out of your mind? I mean, don't you have any sense of how this is being interpreted by the people of our region, how you're outraging them? And then they see the commentary coming from Nebenzia and the Chinese Foreign Ministry. And that is, perceived by the people in the region to be much more just, much more rational, much more pragmatic. And when you combine that with the increasing economic importance of China to the region, to West Asia, and also to the fact that Egypt and Saudi Arabia are now members of the BRICS, I think the landscape has changed. Now, again, I'm not going to exclude the possibility that these people will stab the Palestinian people in the back. I totally accept that that's a real danger, and they might end up doing that. But I don't think this is a given any longer. I think it's entirely possible that we're seeing a shift in the region and that Trump has pushed the envelope too far. That's my read of it for what it's worth. What are your thoughts, Rami?
Dimitri, well, my first thought is that I think Donald Trump said the quiet part out loud. This was always about ethnically cleansing the Palestinians off of their land, whether it is in Gaza or the West Bank. So what I'm mainly curious is that we spoke about this during the ICC and the ICJ court sessions, that one of the hardest parts in proving a case of genocide is the intent. Do you feel like these comments that Trump has been saying can be used against Israel and the United States, and also in their complicity in this genocide, by clearly demonstrating the intent to get the Palestinians off of their land and to ethnically cleanse them?
As a legal matter, 100%. 100%. This is flagrantly unlawful, a straight up violation of international law, of the Fourth Geneva Convention, of the Rome Statute, you name it. These people have just handed, if you're a prosecutor seeking to obtain a judgment against the United States and Israel for committing crimes against humanity, they've just handed you evidence on a golden platter.
Just that statement alone.
Yeah. So I think that this is, I really believe that this is a bridge too far. That's my sense of it. And I want to say one other thing, because as I was walking out the door, my partner, Farida, said something to me, which I thought was really insightful. She said, I've been listening to Trump and I've come to the conclusion that Trump is a really failed businessman. And I'm thinking about that. And, in an earlier stage of my career, when I was working on Wall Street, then I was a securities class actions lawyer, and I was, suing large corporations. I had a lot of interactions with, business people who were quite successful. And I'll tell you, they didn't talk like Trump. However despicable they may have been, however, greedy they may have been, however unscrupulous they may have been, they at least had a certain degree of diplomacy in their language and their business dealings. Even in the business world, I don't think that this type of language would be conducive to success. Trump is not even, everybody says, Trump is a businessman. He sees it. Well, actually, he isn't. From a business perspective, people don't talk this way. This is not conducive to constructive commercial relationships, however greedy you may be. So I think that Trump is, the proverbial bull in the China shop, and the China shop is now run by China, and so they're not going to. I don't think this whole nefarious plan stands much prospect of success, and it may end up hastening the demise of the power of the United States in West Asia.
Dimitri, I know we intentionally didn't speak about what the Western leaders had to say about Trump, but one of them, that I feel like we should pay a bit of attention to, is Germany condemning the Trump's goal to ethnically cleanse Palestinians off of Gaza. But it's absurd considering that the second largest supplier of weapons to the apartheid state, the Zionist entity, is Germany themselves. So Germans are against ethnic cleansing in words, right? They don't like it when Trump speaks this way, but they have no problem with supplying the weapons that have made ethnic cleansing possible. But as much as these words from Trump seem alarming, and of course they are condemnable and don't help the cause, let's keep in mind that the true people who own the key to the liberation of Palestine are the people that are resisting. And I feel like this might be some psyops to get us pessimistic in some way. But we just need to realize that Israel evacuated from the Netzarim corridor. And these are victories that are coming in while Trump is talking, the Palestinian people are acting. And I've never been this motivated in seeing the Palestinians in their resisting hundreds and if not thousands of Palestinian prisoners now leaving the dungeons that they were being kept in for decades. So truly, Trump can speak, but the Palestinians own their own narrative.
Correct. Absolutely. I said this before, Rami. I couldn't agree. Ultimately, the Palestinian people will liberate themselves. That's where this
Dimitri, just before we change subjects, I just wanted to, I mean, this was Netanyahu's trip to Washington. So I don't know if you saw this, Dimitri, but some people were analyzing the flight path that Netanyahu took to get to Washington, and he purposely picked certain countries to fly over out of fear of getting arrested. So I just wanted to maybe quickly, if we have the time to share this over.
I've not seen this. This is interesting. Please share that with us.
Yeah, so I need to click on share screen, share a tab. So if we just restart it here. And this is Netanyahu leaving through Tel Aviv, flies briefly over, I think this is Greece, Italy, France. All of these countries are signatories, right, to the Rome Statute. And now I was hearing from the cradle that they purposefully skipped flying through Canada because Canada could have maybe done something along those lines. This is what the cradle reported, and it was, I think, article recorded by Can Broadcasting, right? So, and then straight to Washington. I don't know. These countries, Dimitri, I believe, have an obligation to arrest Netanyahu. Oh, I wasn't sharing my screen, or was I sharing?
I just shared it. But can you go back, because we didn't see it wasn't on the screen when you showed the departure from Tel Aviv. Yeah. So look, can we just stop there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why am I not surprised that flight passed over Greece? I mean, what a disgrace. You know, the Greek government is in every conceivable way complicit with this genocide. Just right here, I would say about 5 kilometers from where I'm currently sitting, on the outskirts of the town of Kalamata, there is an Air Force base of the Greek Air Force. And at that Air Force base, there is a contingent of trainers from the Israeli drone manufacturer Elbit Systems, and they are training Greek pilots how to use Israeli drones, just 5 kilometers from here. I could go on and on. This government is an utter disgrace. It has brought shame upon the Greek people, and I cannot condemn it strongly enough. And then we see, it's going over Georgia Meloni territory. She's a huge fan of the genocidal regime. And of course, there's Macron, who supported Israel's monstrosities in every conceivable way. It is interesting, I guess, I think typically these transatlantic flights, Rami, they generally do fly over the maritime provinces of Canada. So that is a bit odd that they didn't do that. But that might have been done not necessarily because Netanyahu believed that the Canadians would force his airplane down and arrest him, but because the Trudeau regime simply asked him not to embarrass the government.
Especially if it's not necessary, right? So for the case of Italy, France, maybe they kind of had to. If it was not France, it would have been like Spain and Portugal. We know that these people would have maybe condemned it a bit more. But then again, France and Italy, and I assume Greece as well, have an obligation to stop that plane, force him to land, and go straight to the Hague.
They are all members of the ICC, the Rome Statute. They all.
But by the way, if I'm curious, Dimitri, if this was Putin on the airplane, what would have happened?
I wouldn't have put my money on Putin getting through. Somebody probably would have intervened, but I don't think it would necessarily have been Greece. They wouldn't have wanted to take on Russia. But would France?
We have the Baltic. You call what's his name again? Poiliev, the barking Chihuahua. Well, the Baltic states would have played that role and sacrificing themselves to arrest Putin.
Right. Yeah. So, shall we say a few words before we go to the Q&A about Lebanon, Rami?
Yes.
Right. So I just want to, One comment about the Lebanese situation, of course, the ceasefire expired, the 60-day ceasefire in late January. The genocidal entity, Israel's genocidal entity, was supposed to withdraw its forces from Lebanon. It didn't. They're still there, although not occupying much territory, but they're still on Lebanese territory, which they occupied during the course of the ceasefire. They took advantage of the ceasefire to actually take control of land that they were unable to take control of when the resistance was battling them in South Lebanon. They violated the ceasefire flagrantly over 1,000 times, killing dozens of civilians. They continue to bomb Lebanon. I just have to comment on this shtick. I call it the shtick, where the United States pretends to be in a position to mediate the resolution of conflicts when it is itself a direct or indirect party to the conflict. We're seeing this right now in three very, very important and destructive conflicts. There's the Ukraine war, where you have Trump pretending to be a mediator between Zelensky and Putin, even though the United States government, right up until the current day, is providing weapons and economic aid to Ukraine, has trained tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers, has provided real-time battlefield intelligence to the Ukrainians, has allowed thousands of soldiers who have served in the United States military to fight alongside Ukrainians on the battlefield. You know, no sensible party to a conflict would regard the United States as being a neutral arbiter in the dispute between Ukraine and Russia. And the same is true, of course, when it comes to the conflict between Palestinians and Israelis. They're not a neutral party. They are 100% supportive. And in fact, I would say that they're actually a traitor of the genocide in Gaza, the United States government. That's how deeply involved they are in the destruction of Gaza. And now you have the US president saying, we're going to take over Gaza and we are going to clean out the Palestinians. I mean, for them to be acting as though in Washington they're in some kind of a position to mediate a resolution of this conflict is laughable. And then you have Lebanon, where they sent this character, Amish Hochstein, as an envoy of the Biden administration to, quote unquote, mediate this ceasefire, which Israel has treated like toilet paper, even though he himself was a former Israeli soldier and was acting at the behest of the Biden administration, which was supporting Israel's destruction of South Lebanon. So we shouldn't buy this shtick, people. It is a complete fraud. The United States is not a mediator, a credible mediator, a plausible mediator in any of these conflicts. It is a belligerent, it is a party to the conflict. And if these things are going to get resolved, it's not going to be by the US posing as some kind of a neutral arbiter. It isn't. And this is, you know, abundantly clear in Lebanon. And by the way, I plan to travel to Lebanon next week. I haven't been there in a few months. I plan to the funeral of Hassan Nasrallah, the assassinated former leader of Hezbollah, the Islamic resistance in Lebanon, is scheduled to take place next week. But I also want to visit areas of South Lebanon to see what is going on there, and particularly if we can get close to those areas that are currently being occupied by the military forces of the genocidal entity. And I hope, Rami, that you'll be able to join me.
Yes, absolutely. And also, Dimitri, on a similar note, I don't know if you've been following the border clashes between HTS and Lebanese militias, basically in conjunction with Israel, that is bombing supply lines between Syria and Lebanon. So if there were any more proof that Israel's control of Syrian land is meant to kind of suffocate Lebanon up to the Netzarim corridor, to block access to homes, and to then do joint attacks between HTS and Israel to then bomb these supply lines. There's never been more evidence of that. If there were anyone who had any doubts that the Syrian occupiers, the occupiers of Syria, HTS, is working hands in hands and de facto recognizing Israel by doing so, by doing joint military attacks against Lebanon.
Yeah, they're fighting against fellow Arabs who have resisted Israel's aggressions. but they're doing nothing to oppose Israel's theft of Syrian land. That tells you all you need to know about these so-called rebels. I think quite clearly they're proxies of the United States, Israel, and Turkey.